You could not have added a more important player and a more talented.
I would take Proctor over the best QB recruit in the country.
Okay, let's relax.
But for what our team needs. Yeah.
Welcome back to the ANF Podcast, where we cover Iowa sports.
We've been away for a while, but we have a ton to talk about. So at the forefront of it, we have Kadyn Frederick Lester has joined Iowa as an OC. Kadyn Proctor has returned to Iowa from Alabama. Probably the most impactful transfer portal recruit maybe in the market this year. We also have some announcements from some 2023 defensive returnees.
And we're going to do a summary of the state of the program as well as break down some mailbag questions we received. But I think the first topic we got to cover is the big news, Tim Lester.
The original fallout from Twitter was very interesting. I think the reason for that is because Kevin Johns was kind of seen as the obvious choice.
And you had the statistics of him at his previous stops. You had these really high points per game numbers, high efficiency numbers in terms of yards per game as well, at 4 different stops at these kind of lower tier programs. And when you broke down his kind of background, everyone got really excited. Almost
it felt like the perfect hire,
the home run hire. And truly, I spent a lot of time a few days back going through Duke film, and I liked what I saw. It felt like it'd be a little different approach of what Lester was going to take in terms of like the RPO, more of a read option game. Definitely like to run his QBs more of a centered focus, like a lot less RPO, I'd say. But generally just kind of the same system and just kind of small tweaks.
Yeah, I don't think the systems differ all that much. Besides, as you mentioned, there's less QB run within Lester's system.
Right.
But just focusing on Tim Lester, yes, I mean, I think the original knee-jerk reaction was his time at Syracuse. You had some pretty gaudy, horrible numbers. I'm going to dismiss that through just maybe inheriting some bad players. Syracuse has never been a football program since I've been alive.
It was a decade ago, too.
It's also a decade ago.
So we have more recent data on what type of offense he runs. We have a lot of film of what he ran at Western Michigan to break down.
Yes. And I think, and then you stack on his final year at Western Michigan, obviously had some pretty poor numbers there, but that's ignoring the other 4 years he was the head coach. And obviously he's an offense-minded head coach. Regardless of whether he's calling plays, if you listen to any of his teaching tape, it's clear he designs the offense.
Mm-hmm. And a small fact about that was Kevin Johns was actually an OC for him in 2017.
Yeah.
So this guy that we were, so pumped about getting, he actually was hired by Lester and worked under him, and maybe even took some studies from Lester in his.
Well, then you also just add the context of what has occurred in college football the last 2 years, where G5s have been rated for transfer portal players since onset of the 2021 season or after the 2021 season.
Yeah.
So, you can add some context to that. I don't know if it completely dismisses his faults, but I think the reason he was actually done away with at Western Michigan wasn't because of his offensive.
No, it was just his win-loss record. And
win-loss record. Defense was pretty horrific. His time there, it's pretty common for the MAC.
The AD said
AD was a new guy too.
Yep. Didn't like his vision.
And I think the framing around him being such a poor hire, I think a lot of media members took an opportunity to basically, draw in the hate. We've had experience with that even with our own podcast. Our breakdown of Penn State after that loss, it did bigger. Those numbers were bigger than we've ever done before on our podcast.
Right.
I think that's just kind of reality of media. Is you can get clicks through negative news,
and you can present Lester's resume in 2 different ways.
Yes, you can.
You can present the Syracuse statistics of him as a Power 5 coach, and those are negative. You can focus on the last year of his tenure at Western Michigan, or you can focus on his win-loss record at Western Michigan, and you can present what you want to present. You also can look at the 4 years prior, from 2017 to 2021, where he was, I think, top 35 in yards per game and points per game every one of those years at a MAC school where he's not, bringing in, doesn't have a talent differential between the other schools he's coaching against, but can still put up, nationally top 40 offense of yards per game and points per game. And you can focus on that. So just take the perspective of a writer chose what to write through their own lens.
What works for them?
What works for them? What was going to get the clicks? You could have presented it 2 different ways. And I think our takeaway is,
once we got eyes on the system, it's everything I've wanted.
Right.
And we might also just be dealing with a little bit of Stockholm syndrome. We might be looking at we didn't realize how bad of an ex-boyfriend we had or ex-girlfriend we had.
Right.
And now you get a new fresh one. You're seeing the resume. You're seeing the things they do for you. And it's a whole different story. But at the end of the day, what he is teaching and what he is adding to our scheme is all these holes we've had within our current offensive system for the past 5 years, and why we've seen such a regression within the system. Like this is bringing us into the new age. You to get romantic about it, Kirk has, as we've talked about, these old fundamental laws of football. RPO system is like, it is the New Testament in that it is legalized cheating. I detest RPO. I think it's a broken style of football. Against Illinois this past year, I remember watching the film back and seeing plays where Nick Jackson's engaged in a tackle at 2 yards and they throw a ball in behind him. Yeah. And it's just not fair football. But if teams are cheating, let's cheat. Yeah. Is my opinion about RPO.
And I think the easiest way, when you're actually breaking down offensive philosophies in football, the easiest way to think about it is basketball in a way.
Yeah.
So you think about Iowa has essentially not embraced the 3-point line. And everyone else is playing Golden State type of football.
Yeah.
When Curry hit all those threes and everyone kind of really branded into the 5-out style. It happened in college basketball with Villanova. It occurred in, the entire NBA played a copycat.
Yeah.
Currently, the style that Lester is employed at Western Michigan, 80% of G5 lower tier programs are employing. RPO is the modern way to play this game. So I was taking a step into that modern world. I just took, 3 or 4 games from 2021 where I'm like, I'm going to watch at the peak of his powers. How did he coach his offense? What was the efficiencies behind it? What did they do well? And my main takeaway is it looks a lot like 2019 Minnesota. And every Midwest team and every Big Ten team that's Minnesota, Wisconsin, Illinois, Iowa, has been chasing that type of production from a year. You had Morgan throw for 3,200 yards. You had Tyler Johnson and receivers. Bateman both went for 1,200 yards plus. Yep. You had over 2,000 yards rushing between their backs.
Rodney Smith and Shannon Brooks.
Yep. So you had this really effective offense, and you can talk about their first 8 games against the defenses they played, but truly, they had some really great performances too in the bowl game.
Penn State, have we ever had that type of performance against a high-level defense?
And I actually, a few weeks back, I tweeted out, we need to consider Kirk Soraka for our OC. And the first thing I think about when I watch Tim Lester's offense, this is Kirk Soraka.
Yeah.
This is a guy who's employing the RPO and employing a 11 personnel system, not to throw the ball, but to run the ball.
Yeah.
And if you hear him talk about it, the first thing he has to do is we have to establish a run. We have to take care of the ball, and we have to drop there. We have to make them load the box. And if Kirk can hear 3 things in one sentence that really wants him to hire somebody, he hears those 3 things. And maybe the difference of Lester being hired and Kevin Johns being hired is that was not a part of the pitch. Maybe that bulk of security that Lester brings up so much wasn't a part of Johns' grand scheme.
I'm sure
of his
it all
pitch.
is, but I also think the element of Johns being kind of a hop around guy, and also. Let's just talk about Johns for a moment here. He was attached to a lot of offensive-minded head coaches in Wilson and Norvell, in Kingsbury. No one took him anywhere.
Right.
So if you have this, this Johns was your shining star, for what you should be chosen for. Why did he not get picked up by any of? Why did whoever Elko, who just left for Texas A&M, go get Colin Klein rather than Johns?
Right.
If this is your brainchild that you think your program is based around, you hold on to that guy.
Right.
So while you can compare the resumes, there's still there's some marks on Johns that we would have went through if he was chosen as well.
Right. If you want to have a negative slant, you would have just said those things.
If the negative slant is, if that's your crux, then you're going to that.
Right.
But I think what we can do now is just do a brief breakdown what RPO is, because a lot of Iowa fans haven't seen a lot of it, and that we've experienced a lot of it. From Illinois runs a very heavy RPO set. Like I mentioned, it was painful to watch back how many legal mans downfields they had. Minnesota is basically revolutionized it within the Big Ten, as you mentioned, 2019 and on have used it really effectively. Essentially, what it allows you to do is exploit QBs that aren't overly talented.
Right.
And I think from a program standpoint, Kirk was always kind of caught up in being an NFL development program. I think within the defensive side of the ball, that's fine. We still are going to keep that same mentality. We're teaching guys the right way. Within offense, it was just such a difficult ask to be a tight end running back, running the ball focused team, and then bring in high school level players that were capable of playing pro style at receiver and QB. That requires a Jared Goff that we saw play in the NFC title game this year, where you have some 6'5" guy who can rip the ball. You know, you had a Spencer Petras like that, but if he doesn't have the correct mentality, if he has, he gets spooked, accuracy, all those things, that doesn't end up working out that well.
Yeah.
Receivers, you need true X receivers, 6'2", 6'1" guys, can go over the middle, can break the top off, can, run every route in the route tree.
You've had one of them.
When you go RPO slant game and you're taking advantage of the middle of the field for the first time, which might be the first time under Ferentz's tenure that I've seen it, we might have the ability to actually throw the middle because of some things we're going to break out here. You open the door to QBs who might not be the most talented in the arm department. Yeah. Might be able to throw the 10-yard slant really well, might be accurate, have all the mentalities you need within a successful, lower level QB, but it's not going to be something we would have usually recruited within the recruiting process.
And you actually, if you go back to the 2021 Western Michigan season, they're playing Northern Illinois. And if you go back and listen to these broadcasts, you actually can pull some good, tidbits of what the announcers are talking to Lester about. They always like, oh, he talked to the coach. Here's what he's looking for. Here's what he loves about his QB. And his main thing about Ellaby, who was his QB who threw for 3,200 yards that year, was second in the MAC. That sounds pretty familiar to Tanner Morgan throwing for 3,200 yards in 2019. They're very similar builds.
Yep.
But what he said was, I don't really care about arm strength. I'm more looking for a rhythmic passer that can get the ball out in time. And if you want to make me smile as an Iowa fan and thinking about QB play that we can recruit consistently, because we're not grabbing 4 or 5 stars. It's just a reality of Iowa as a program. And under Ferentz, we're not grabbing them. Maybe if we switch to a different head coach and he leans into offense, maybe that's a reality going forward. But our current state of the program, we need to recruit high 3 stars, low 4 stars that are point guards. You need a guy that can get the ball out in time, be rhythmic, be a good decision maker, be Brock Purdy's, be Tanner Morgan's, be Sam Hartman's,
be Cade
McNamara, be John Paddock's. And this offense and what Lester believes in is having those type of guys in the backfield at QB that can just get you first downs and move the ball. And Ferentz is actually crux of his entire program is that he's always going to want the strong arm and the arm strength guy. So this makes me actually very positive to think about, because Lester made that comment. He's like, I'd actually rather have a weaker arm guy that we can coach into him arm strength and get him stronger, and have more of a rhythmic guy that can play point guard. And that's, if Ferentz would have heard that,
well, I think in Ferentz's old offense, last year with Brian, Greg, KOK, it was necessary. If you're going to ask guys to boot or play action and throw a 15-yard shot outside the sideline, that's what's required. And that's why we saw Deacon for as long as we did.
Right.
Because he was the only guy on the team that had that skill set.
Yeah.
And I think he probably, through data points, Paddock comes in and throws for 300 against him. Mm-hmm. He goes, this guy's not a prototypical guy. He's playing a high-level defense.
Yeah.
They're just getting inside routes completely isolated because our linebackers are diving down. Mm-hmm. And that's, I think we've pointed this out multiple times, but Kirk is essentially allergic to throwing the ball in the middle of the field.
Yeah.
And there's a reason for that. And I honestly agree with it outside of RPO. Mm-hmm. You have 3 opportunities for horribleness to occur. If it's a straight, you're talking about a straight drop back under center, or even just a shotgun pass where you're throwing, in breaking routes, slants, deep ends, drags, even, curl routes. You have defenders who get an initial pass read on the D-line who can get their hands up and tip the ball. Mm-hmm. You have linebackers at that level who can pick the pass off if they get eyes on the QB fast enough. You have tip passes from your receivers if it's a hot pass that fall into the safety's hands.
Yeah.
And if you watch college football and NFL long enough, you'll see those patterns happen to the point where you don't even want to throw over the middle. Mm-hmm. I watched enough football where I puke a little bit when I see someone throw a slant. Mm-hmm. And the deep end is pretty much all you'll see in the NFL because of that reason.
And if you're a program that's focusing on turnover margin as your number one category, number one driving factor
protecting
of your program,
the defense is your highest priority,
right?
Not scoring.
Then what you are you're the ethos of how you conduct your offense is not to throw over the middle.
No.
You're like, can we limit that to 5 throws in the middle of the entire game? That's our goal.
Yep.
If it's on first and second down,
when we need to go win the game, you'll see.
right.
I'm thinking about like Nebraska. All of a sudden, we were down 17. You saw PDA throw like four straight balls over the middle.
Right.
That's
But
where
if we're in a tie
we'll
game,
empty it up. Yeah,
right.
tie game lead.
Yeah.
You're not going to see it.
We're not taking that risk.
What RPO allows though is because the O-line is blocking like it's a run play.
Mm-hmm.
Safeties, linebackers, D linemen all have to. That initial reaction is they are seeing run tells.
Yeah.
And how defenses operate is everything's a tell. And RPO essentially creates a scenario where 7 defenders play run, 4 play pass, 6 play run, 5 play pass.
Yep.
And again, I don't think it's fair. I think we might eventually see this undone within college football, which would be interesting. But what it allows for is you can now have a 7-yard slant, or you could be almost considered like a quasi post at that point. But that guy has now a clean run over the middle of the field where the linebackers are not there to pick it off because they're shooting up to defend the run. Deep linemen are engaging the O linemen as if they are being run blocked, so you don't have the opportunity to get your hand up or even really get your eyes on the QB. And the last line of defense is your safety, who you're sitting there, and that tip pass isn't as damaging.
Yeah.
So that reality combined with Kirk Ferentz football, where now you can unlock this over the middle passing, which I think if any rational critique of Iowa's offense would be we don't take any risk on offense. Well, now you can take an educated risk with RPO. And that's where the marrying of, Tim's philosophy and Kirk's philosophy works.
Right. But I think this is a great time to break into what will this look like legitimately next year.
Yes.
So let's think about 2024, Lester's first year. And we can think about, that offense as a whole, how it operates and why it's actually a great offensive run for a lower tier, program like Iowa in terms of like offensive skill, like quarterbacks and stuff and receivers. But how is it going to be married? Because I can think of the positives. I think Cade McNamara might not be a better QB in college football to run a point guard offense like this.
Yes.
You're talking about, first time you watch his film in 2021, of all things, played Western Michigan. I actually watched a little bit of that game. Gets the ball out quickly, extremely accurate, sets his feet quickly,
knows how to
quick
influence,
decision maker.
Trusts himself, confident.
You can tell he learns
manages a line of scrimmage, can
Right.
execute clap. Actually, I want to get to that later too.
Right. But he is a great, we can get more into, there's a mailbag question about it, but he's a great guy to run it. Then you have Caleb Brown. And if you actually could compare one guy in the NFL to Caleb Brown, it'd be Sky Moore. And Sky Moore was number 1 MAC receiver for yards per catch, touchdowns, everything. He was all-world MAC. He might have been offensive player in the MAC that year. I can't remember. But he looks just like Caleb Brown, both undersized 5'10 guys. You think about recruiting undersized 5'10 guys. We've been doing that for a while. They fit into the system. But then you think of them I think those players have a very good chance of succeeding in this. I worry about tight end usage with the current strength, because when you turn on Lester's film, you see 11 personnel a lot. And the offense kind of wants to be 11 personnel because it's always trying to draw those safeties back.
And it's got to get the seam.
It's got to get up a seam, and it's got to have a bubble that draws you horizontally. 11 gives you the spread aspect of vertical, scare the shit out of you, horizontally scare the shit out of you on every play. When you play 12, and you have 2 tight ends, and they're behind the line of scrimmage, you just lack that type of, we can't have a safety roll down, but I know what your point you're going to make is that we're actually going to probably most likely split out a tight end.
Yeah.
So Scott Docterman made a good point, like, hey, this 11, 12 personnel might be an issue. Most likely we're going to have, they call him a bastard tight end, where you're going to play him like Kelsey, you're going to play him like a Porta. He'll be your slot guy. And actually that might give you a better synergy to run the bubbles that you'll see in RPO. So a consistent play they have is an inside zone read, and you actually slip out your tight end or have him in the slot, and he starts leading a bubble screen. And now you're not running a bubble screen with the receiver blocking for you. You have a 240-pound tight end leading a block against a corner or a safety, and you have a huge advantage.
Furthermore, also the slant game, if you're going to be an over the middle throwing team, having big body targets is also key as well.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to want to frame a guy up that's 6'3" or 6'4". A guy we're bringing in this year, Hoffman, makes perfect sense for a guy who can operate in the slot or out wide. Ostrenga fits in that bill. I wouldn't even mind seeing Lachey out there.
Mm-hmm.
Penn State does that, where they'll play them as the tight ends as the widest man, because essentially you gain spacing of having a guy out there.
Yep.
You now add an extra blocker, and if they're athletic enough to throw the ball up to in a jump ball situation. But the big one for me is you think about like a Hoffman and even a slant case. Why can't he run a slant?
Well,
he's not going to beat him
matching-
cleanly, but he's going to have the size advantage on him.
Yeah.
And then you always have that bubble combo where now it's a dominant block rather than a wide receiver block.
And you have to match personnel.
Yes.
If you have 2 tight ends on the field, you have to play a 4-3. If you don't, we'll just motion him in and run the ball.
Yep.
So I really like the idea that, let's say he is split out in a slot position. You're like, oh, he's not as mobile as another guy. He's not a linebacker on him.
Yeah.
So then you have this stick combo that this guy.
Or you just bring him back in before the snap and run inside zone.
Exactly. Use him as an H-back and clear something out. So I think that's where we'll actually see this offense go. Is our expectation is that'll be 12, but it will look like 11.
Yeah. And there's 3 aspects of this system that I really want to see employed by Iowa. And we've made points about this in the past, but first off, Brian just had so many archaic ideas about how to coach an offense that he never really got to advance on things. And the points I'm going to get to are, hurry up offense. So what are the advantages of hurry up offense? Mm-hmm. First off, you can get to the line a lot faster than you would under center. Mm-hmm. That allows for what we've seen for the better part of 6 or 7 years now, which is the clap, or you can add a cadence into it. What that allows you to do is discover blitzes from deep. You can discover motions. You can discover a bunch of things from a defense that Iowa. If you want to break down plays that went wrong this past year, it was play actions where teams would blitz from deep. Mm-hmm. And QB's not anticipating blitz. He gets blitz in his face late. And that's something you can just almost wholeheartily eliminate, or at least force them to move from farther distance away.
And I think that also could be a negative of.
It could.
When I watched watching Western Michigan that year and having them be a check with me audible. So what Iowa does is essentially they call a play in a huddle.
Yeah.
They go to the line of scrimmage, and the quarterback has the audibles. And that's why it's always so hard to learn the offense, is that the quarterbacks are using calls on the line of scrimmage that have to be very detailed because they have to describe a lot of different things. It's not turn to the sideline, get my one,
receiver gets theirs, lineman gets theirs,
exactly.
or running back gets theirs.
You have to have one play call that describes everything.
Yeah.
So it's a lot more difficult to get on the field because those audibles are a lot more intricate. I don't know if Ferentz is going to accept that check with me system. I think we're going to still play the audible at the line of scrimmage because of what happened with Michigan. I think Ferentz didn't make a stink about it at all. It's like, you guys were the idiots that showed your signs.
Yeah.
I was a smart enough guy to go in that, no, people have been stealing signs for 30 years, 40 years. You guys all do that song and dance on the sideline. You show your entire play. I've eliminated that. It makes it way more difficult to audible and has a way more higher, the quarterback has to know a lot more. That is my concern, is that we're not going to have the synergies of this program that you turn on the Western Michigan film. You see all these great things. You see throws over the middle. You see that check with me system. There's a reality where we have this disjointed offense where
Greg Davis
all over again, where Greg Davis comes in, he's the passing game coordinator and Brian's the run game coordinator. And we get into this option, we get into a shotgun set, and it looks like everyone else playing shotgun. But then we get in the under center set, and it doesn't look anything like the shotgun set. It has none of the same rules. It has none of the same motion or fakes or stuff that is married together. And you have this kind of all right, Lester, your shotguns, that's your stuff. But we're gonna still have Kirk and Budmeyer ball under center ball. And when you turn on the Western Michigan film, there is no under center ball other than like 3 plays out of 4 games I watched.
Yeah.
And they're really cool plays, but it's usually a sneak with the tight end pushing him in the back. So that is my concern, is that Ferentz needs to give him the keys. Maybe you can have your under center goal line set. Yeah. That's fine. Yeah. Have it be 20%. Because what my concern is, it's going to be 70 to 60% Ferentz still, and 30%.
They're going to say, handle the shotgun.
You got shotgun.
Yeah.
We'll do that RPO stuff. We'll mix it in. You'll see it once a game.
Yeah.
And maybe that's just, me not believing how Ferentz is going to, give this guy.
Yeah.
But that's really when I break down what the negatives could be of this hire, is that there is no synergies. And truly, it's not the same offense. I mean, you could not talk about a more different approach to playing offensive football. Throwing over the middle, not hurry up, but like check with me.
Yeah.
Put the ball, I don't know.
Put the ball in the QB's hands, and we don't know where the ball is going before the snap even happens.
Right.
That's the leap I want to see happen, though, because I think that's a product of Tim being a former QB is he trusts his guy to make plays.
Right.
He understands that QBs have to make plays. And that's also what Brian lacked. There's any knowledge of like how much control you actually really need to give this guy.
Right.
This can't be some half-hearted thing where you want to control this guy's behavior. I was listening to his teaching tape, and the QB, it's a true RPO. It's not called before the play. If you see a guy dive from the slot, you throw the slant. If you see any other type of action, you are in control of what happens to that play, the ball snap. That takes a lot of thinking. That takes a lot of confidence in that guy. And that's really where...
And taking your hands off.
Yeah, and taking your hands off and letting a kid kind of decide how this goes. Yeah. But that's how you actually recruit a QB. Right. It's like, we're putting the team in your hands here. This is not some, we're going to give you 3 checks and you're running left, right, or booting.
But maybe the hesitation behind that when Brian was trying to teach RPOs is that Kirk goes, all right, Brian, give me your 3 reasons how you teach an RPO. What's your mesh point look like?
Yeah.
How are you riding that guy?
Yeah.
Where are your eyes at? Like, that's number thing for an RPO. Like, who are you looking at? Who are you trying to influence? Brian, can you teach how to influence a guy with your eyes? Like, what is your pre-snap and post-snap instantly?
Yeah.
And that's why I think I'm excited about Lester. Maybe why he can be convincing is that he can go to Kadyn and go like, here's how I want you to hold the ball. And here's how I want you to let the running back to take it and when not to take it. And when you do pull it, or when you have your eyes on that mesh point, or eyes up during the mesh point, here's what I want you looking at. And maybe I want you to look this way. All those little rules to teach an RPO. And when Brian's back
Brian
there,
pull that confidence.
Brian's like, no, he's just fucking rip it out and you fucking whip
the ball guy's up and hit him right now. I remember we watched that tape with, I forgot who he's sitting down with, but he's like, you just got to throw it. It's like, Jesus Christ.
Like, there's so much more nuance to it. And maybe Lester can convince Kirk.
Was also convincing the guy he can do it too.
Right.
Like, that's when you have a guy who, Lester started 4 years in college and threw for 12,000 yards in his career. Yeah. If he's telling you can do it, you believe him. It's not some right guard teaching you how to play quarterback.
Right.
And that's where it's like exciting that this is happening. We're not going to exist in the Stone Age. We don't like our QB development's been ass for a reason.
And this guy's not some bum I played QB. He was, I think when he graduated college, he was top 10 NCAA all time.
Yes.
Like, he was whipping it around.
Yeah.
And that's an important aspect. He has some confidence how to teach it, has some way to imbue confidence on QBs, how to think about yourself when you're going into games. Yeah. Like, that's important.
That's all important. That might be the most important part of aspect of QB is developing confidence. It's Harbaugh. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, as you mentioned, the fear though is that this is not going to be a full-on adoption.
Right.
And if we try and create this marrying between, okay, we go Greg Davis style where it's like shotgun, this RPO thing's cute. We think we can really utilize it. Mm-hmm. We're still going to run our ace sets, boot, power, all that stuff we saw for the past 3 years with Budmeyer joining the staff. But then when we go shotgun, we're going to have this RPO option so we can actually run inside zone.
Yeah.
If that is what we're going to install, this is going to look like a disaster.
Right.
Because RPO cannot be ran as kind of this cursory thing you do. It needs to be repped every single play.
Yeah.
And that is like, if you're going to have a guy, if you're going to have K step out there with basically a fall camp to learn how to accurately, as you mentioned, learn that mesh point timing. Yeah. The timing's crazy. It's a high wire act every single play. And that's why I think eventually, Kirk's going to get really sick of it. Is because this is it's the definition of invariability or variability. We're talking about an actual process that is not decided before the play, and that just seems like anti-Kirk ball. Mm-hmm. But if this evolution occurs, there's a great marker for Kirk actually evolving again. This might marker. Be, where it is now, Kirk 4.0, wherever it is now.
Yeah,
that'd be fantastic.
Well, I think it's time to move on. I think that's a good breakdown. But I think Kadyn Proctor news.
Yeah.
We are happy to announce a new sponsor for the ANF Podcast. The ANF Podcast is sponsored by Eye Surgeons Associates, proudly serving Eastern Iowa and Western Illinois for all your eye care needs for over 40 years.
And then maybe get into the people who are coming back in the defense. But, Proctor was, I remember seeing some tweet when Saban got fired or not fired, but when he retired. And someone's like, oh, Proctor could come back. I'm like, no shot.
Yeah.
And that would be the most massive news imaginable. Because I think the one, if we want to do a 2023 and review, the takeaway was the O-line really never got there.
Yeah.
It didn't blow assignments. I think that's what we saw from week one. We mentioned they didn't blow assignments. They had their right guys blocked, weren't leaving guys. First time in probably 2 years that's happened.
Yeah.
Maybe 3 years.
Yeah.
And then you go back to 2019 and 18, that happened all the time.
Interior line play was just a nightmare from at least a diagnosing standpoint.
Right.
And finally that went away.
It went away. So we play assignment football all year, but then that's actually the scary part is that we play assignment football, but we didn't move people.
Yeah.
And that's when you get into like the Tennessee game and the Michigan game and,
Penn
these
State.
games where you can at Penn State and any of these games, these aren't missed recruiting opportunities. A lot of them are. These aren't young guys. They're old guys with a lot of experience. And truly, it was the most experienced offensive line Kirk's had in a long time, since 2020. I'd say that's the other most experienced line, and then this line. And everyone gets a year older, but Richmond should have been there. Jones should have been there. Colby should have been there. And they all flashed. Richmond had his moments and some massive down blocks against Purdue and Illinois and Nebraska. Jones had some great screenplays, and Colby really never had that explosive play the entire year, but was solid. But these guys aren't first rounders. They're not second rounders. They're not these really high picks. And that's where you actually have your true concern in the Iowa program. And maybe they're looking around even going like, these guys are old enough.
Yeah.
We don't got, we had depth too. We brought in 2 transfers and we had depth beyond that. We had DeYoung and,
Steffens and
guys we could have gone to.
Ellsbury. Yeah.
And we had a few injuries, but like these guys were dinged up for a few games. It wasn't like we lost 6 of them.
Yeah.
And it just never, they had moments, but man, that's what we do this for. It's why we have Kirk here. It's why
If Kirk wants to maintain a healthy offensive program, which we haven't had, it is through just being a dominant O-line team.
Right.
You can be simplistic.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like Michigan came out and ran some insane stuff against Washington. They just went out and blocked them for 4 quarters. Michigan
Legitimately, the same offense we're going to employ, like Michigan had a few more, tweaks on it, some more special plays. But football, as much as Brian and
The reason
Kirk,
they dominated the game is because they lined up and ran inside zone for 8 yards to carry and a couple 70-yarders.
Michigan's won the most successful program in the country the last 3 years by just bullying people.
Yeah.
There's nothing
Having
other
the
than
Jimmys
just,
and Joes.
just moving guys 8 yards.
Yeah.
Like it's not, it's a Harbaugh program. It's been like that since Stanford, but that's what we don't have that capability even at the peak of our powers to even be 75% of that.
Yeah.
And that's what really it's tough to get very excited about the program because that should be an element of us.
Yeah.
And maybe
you should have lined up against like Minnesota this year. Even Illinois, they had some big names, but they didn't end up performing that well. A lot of teams ran the ball really well on them. I think of a couple, 3 or 4 other teams that you should have lined up and ran on them with the experience you had on the O-line.
Yeah.
Granted, it is difficult to say that because of Lachey was going to be the most dominant inline blocker since Hawkinson at tight end.
Yeah.
Saw some reps from him early in the season. Was like, man, how are you going to stop that wall down? Eric All was a fantastic wham back.
Yeah.
That combo, losing the 2 of them, from a receiving threat, obviously was gigantic, but like no one really realizes how big of a run blocking loss that was as well.
Yeah.
Strangood, he definitely improved as the season went on. You saw some better reps. Early on, he was very, not soft, but he was not a dominant.
Well, compared to Eric All and Lachey, the first 3 weeks, when you could see when Lachey was when Ostrango was blocking somebody. He's just hit him with his chest.
Yeah, he's playing patty cake.
Yeah.
But he did, like I said, he did a better job as the season went on. He had a great block against Illinois.
Yeah.
But the O-line just hasn't taken that step. And now with the injection of Proctor, if one position, right tackle, that's usually our run blocking.
If you could have circled the biggest need other than receiver 2.
Yeah.
But
for what Iowa's program is?
Right. You could not have added a more important player and a more talented.
I would take Proctor over the best QB recruit in the country.
Okay, let's relax.
But for what our team needs. Because you're not going to be able to utilize a QB recruit with receivers,
that's true.
Style, all that.
Right.
Like, we can run behind Proctor.
There's an action argument there.
No, I think there is.
Yeah.
I think it's set.
All right, so let's think of the best. I don't know.
Yeah. QB transfer.
Yeah, QB transfer. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
Sam Hartman from last year.
Yeah.
Or Kadyn Proctor.
And we're rocking
and
with
we're
Cade.
Iowa.
And we're rocking with Cade.
Yeah.
We got Cade already. I'm Proctor for sure.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Because you can run behind him in every big moment. And if you're going to be an on-schedule team, having the boogeyman at right tackle is huge.
Yeah.
There's going to have to be, defensive coordinators are going to have to account for that.
Yeah.
We're going to lose at right tackle.
Yeah.
We're going to give up 3 yards.
And you can think of a better way to have him broken into the Iowa way to go to play under Saban.
Yeah.
And play in massive moments and to go through all of his growing pains. Like it's almost like, wow, that was
We got to chip all the bad parts off them.
Right.
And then now you get the finished product.
a confident, well-taught, most dominant guy you can imagine.
Not going to be afraid of anyone he sees in front of him.
No. And that's who our right tackle is now.
Yeah.
And we went from DeYoung or Dunker, you guys are both guards.
Yeah.
Now we're going to this guy's going to play in the league.
Might be the first round pick in 2 years.
Yeah. This guy's playing in the league as long as he wants.
Yeah.
That's a massive difference.
Well, then you add now Dunker is going to be able to start at left guard.
Yeah.
DeYoung doesn't even have a place on the line to play.
Yeah.
He can add depth. Ellsbury adds depth. Steffens adds depth. You're 8 deep. You have the boogeyman at right tackle.
Right.
You have a developed line the rest of the way.
And that's what you're actually going to, all right. So I came into this year saying this is going to be the redemption year for the O-line.
Yeah.
If you do embrace Lester's system and you can push that second safety out of the box, and you can have lighter boxes, let's just see what the O-line can do. Because, man, it will never be older.
Yeah.
It will never be better recruited. It will never be more experienced. If you can't run simple inside zone concepts with a light box and go for 6, every single time, then there's product of maybe Doyle was more important in the strength and conditioning aspect and growing these linemen than we think. Because there's a massive element missing here, because these guys should be moving people now. They're old, they're not missing assignments. They should be destroying light boxes.
Well, also the Proctor thing really brings back the recruiting angle again too. If you develop Proctor into, you're not even really need to develop into a first round pick.
Right.
He's
But if he just turns into one.
If he just turns into one, that's just another mark on the Kirk Ferentz checkbox. And since Wirfs, we have not. Wirfs and Alaric went in successive years. Since then, but Linderbaum's not. He's a center. He's not that.
Right.
The tackle is what we really had developed. It was these dancing bears that were flexible, athletic.
Yeah.
But then also could maul you.
Yeah.
We didn't have a guy like that in the system. Now, if you can bring Proctor in, maybe some other guy can see himself in that system, and you can develop that or pick up that giant recruit in a year or two, and keep that train rolling. Because that was starting to dry up. And I think it's because you didn't have the recruiting pitch of Doyle anymore. Doyle could go, I turned Robert Gallery, who's a tight end at East Buck, into a first-round tackle. Brandon Sheriff was a quarterback his junior year. I turned him into a first-round tackle or guard. Yeah. And he had this list. And once Doyle went out the door, that recruiting pitch kind of went out the door with him. Even though Kirk is an O-line focused man, I think he would even have pointed to Doyle as this is your guy who's going to develop you.
Hey, you want to come in at 240? We're not going to put 1 ounce of bad weight on you. You're not going to lose any flexibility. You're going to be even more flexible than you were.
Yeah.
And you're going to be actually even stronger than you can imagine.
Yeah.
That was the Doyle pitch. And it's because he's always on the cutting edge of every aspect of strength and conditioning.
Yeah.
And he's also a prick.
he might have just been able to sort out the bad eggs from the good.
Yeah.
And knew how to motivate guys. Yeah. And maybe knew how to toughen up correctly. Yeah. You probably didn't accomplish it in the best way, but rarely does that occur in football.
Right.
Football is not society.
Yeah.
It's the opposite.
Yeah.
It's war.
Yeah.
It is antithetical to how we operate in an office environment.
Morehouse always says it. He always said the best. College football is the military.
Yeah.
You're going into the military. You're going to have a different aspect of society and just what you've been raised through. Iowa's the Navy SEALs.
Yeah.
So you're not just joining some program, you're joining the Navy SEALs. And actually, it has helped our pitch with the transfer portal, because we don't, kiss your ass during the transfer portal. We're not going to tell you how easy it's going to be and how it's going to be
You're going to be the star.
You're going to be the star. We give you it straight as narrow. And then you go off to these major colleges. You go to Ohio State, Oklahoma. You go to Michigan, you go to Oklahoma, you go to all these programs, and then you're not the guy. And the recruiting pitch that you heard at Iowa was honest. And it's the same recruiting pitch you hear in the transfer portal. It's honest.
And it's the same way the NFL is going to view you too.
Exactly. So
if you can get a gold stamp from Iowa in that final year for you at Iowa, before your NFL, draft, that's gold standard.
And I think that's what the portal, we're going to see consistent success for that reason, because we're going to sell it to you straight. And maybe Proctor didn't get that sell, straight from Alabama. Maybe he got, a different type of viewpoint. And then he's like, Iowa wasn't lying to me the entire time.
Yeah.
I think it's time to move on to the. Yeah. So we talked about Higgins coming back, and we were like, that's huge. That was a massive addition and super exciting. And then in the meantime, we brought back Schulte, brought back Nick Jackson and Castro and Jamari. So essentially, your starting defensive unit
for the Big Ten championship game
is
down a guy.
Down Logan Lee.
Yeah.
And that's it.
They held the national title winning team to their lowest yards per play
And Joe Evans, technically.
And in a decade.
Yeah. And what it does is you have insane linebacker depth now because Shire and Cater were going to be great players.
Well, you also mix in Harrell and Fisher.
Right. You have
Both those guys are probably playing too.
Yeah. Rexroth,
Yeah.
And then you keep your corner, in Jamari. Now your third corner or your second corner you're choosing from is between Nestor, TJ Hall, and Deshaun Lee. It's like you have three guys we loved in recruiting. All three of those guys, they're all up, Nestor's still only a true sophomore, but the other guys are third-year players.
Yep.
You have this just really old, deep, and talented defense.
Well, the guy who wins that position is going to have to play perfect football.
Yeah.
All three are athletically capable. I personally, I hope it's Nestor just because from the recruiting process, I liked him the most.
Mm-hmm.
Our only real question around him was whether he was fast enough. They have him on gunner on punt.
Yeah.
So I don't think there's a speed question at all.
Mm-hmm.
If there's not a speed question with him, I think he is the most intellectually gifted defensive back I've seen us recruit. I haven't seen a guy play that perfect of football in high school ever.
You couldn't believe it.
No.
He understood every single assignment he played, the way he broke on the ball, the way he would pass off routes. He's just very talented. And also, I think we haven't brought up Entringer yet, but I think he did tear his ACL. But
he tore his ACL?
Yeah, I think the bowl game.
Oh, man.
But I could see him at corner one day too.
Yeah.
They play him as a dime corner.
If you're playing in the slot, you can play corner.
Right. And him at strong safety, but it's more of let's get our best DB on the field type deal.
Yeah.
It's just a very bright future in the secondary. Again, obviously, that's the best position we recruit every year.
Yeah.
But
that's that's one of the remaining concerns with Cooper gone.
Yeah.
So we're trying to figure out basically two pieces.
Right.
Other than that, early season Iowa defense next year is going to be insane.
Yeah.
And we've seen that from, I think it was Campbell's senior year. It's it was the whole defense came back.
Mm-hmm.
And then they started off the season without it was South Dakota State, didn't score a touchdown.
Mm-hmm.
Iowa State, through how many, that's the Iowa State game we lost.
Yeah.
But still, it's early on, there's just no miscommunications early. And that's, if you're not having that occur early in an Iowa football season, that doesn't get, that just gets better as the season goes along.
Definitely.
So
you get Nick Jackson playing all Big Ten level, weak side linebacker
right
right
Higgins
away.
is going to be better next year.
Right.
That's a crazy thought. All those guys that Herkett's going to be better.
Mm-hmm.
Craig's hopefully going to be healthy.
Yeah.
X is going to be in the second year.
Yeah.
And then target him one time in his whole true sophomore year.
Yeah.
I don't think I got targeted a single time.
And guess what? We had Deacon Hill and the worst offense ever, but this defense won 10 games.
Yeah.
So even if the offense doesn't turn out to be some Spitfire moving the ball and scoring 35 points a game, we're going to win 9 games.
Yeah.
You look at the schedule, you look at Washington now at home, that's a much different game than it used to be. I think that once again, we can predict 9 to maybe high end 10 wins.
You could go as far as 11.
You could.
Yeah.
Your hardest game's at Ohio State. Every other game's
defense is one of those things where it's showing up every time.
Travels.
You're not going to have, a team that drops the gigantic pass,
and
a Detroit.
You're going to be a good special teams team. You brought in a crazy new punter. You got a great kicker.
Yep.
You got a great defense. You're going to be able to run the ball most likely.
Yep.
So.
And you got a culture that's stable and is likely going to keep playing hard.
Stay the program.
Yep.
It's in a good spot. I think Iowa fans, when we get in the offseason and certain topics around offense makes you doom and gloom, but you never can lose the sight of what Kirk's built here. Programs like us don't have defenses like this. You always see it's the tier 1 defenses in college football. Georgia, Alabama, Iowa. It's imagine if you were offensively Oregon, Washington, Iowa. You'd be we're sick.
Yeah.
We have
a chance every year to be good.
Right. We have a chance every year to be good because we have an insane defense. That's Kirk. He hired Phil. He developed him. He puts all of his best athletes on defense. Cooper didn't be playing receiver for any other program. We put him at corner. We had Desmond King. Could have played him at receiver or running back. We put him at corner. It's Kirk makes these choices to make his defense amazing. He has only 100 guys he could choose from. He puts all the dogs on defense.
Yeah. X would be playing receiver for us if it was, granted he was a high-level safety recruit. He went to Ohio State.
But there's some other guys like that. You think about...
Jalen Watson, that's most recent recruiting.
Yeah, the dude's going to be
that dude's our starting receiver.
He's a second-team All-Big Ten receiver. He's junior year.
But they can go out and talk to him and be hey, do you want to be, a above average Big Ten receiver, or do you want to make $15 million in your career?
Exactly. And that's a lot easier pitch.
And that's an easy pitch.
Yeah. I think it's time to do some mailbag questions.
Yeah, let's do it.
You want to pull up the YouTube? I'll get the Twitter.
So it'd be the Tennessee. I think we can just do a quick recap of Tennessee. I think what we, our initial reaction from it, it was just a typical Kirk Bowl game where it lacked emotion on our side. From a certain perspective, almost seemed like we lacked preparation when it came to, breaking out new plays. And
well, you had some interesting starts. You had Reams playing at DN, which that's a nod to this guy put in, 5 years in the program, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
He was like the Anthony Nelson recruit when he signed, and we're like, this guy's going to be a stud. They played him like a lot of the game.
Yeah.
Like they gave him a big nod.
Pittman played way too much.
In that game. I think the pace of that game of just like how our D line is built, they're bigger guys. We were not ready for that many reps. And we lost rhythm. I've never seen us lose like defensive line rhythm as bad as that was. And then I think Lamaleva is a freaking stud.
Yeah.
I think that guy, like, he had some plays in that game where he rolled out and he put a ball behind a guy's head on the run, 15 yards down, 20 yards downfield. I'm like, that's NFL.
Well, and also him in open space I don't think they're ready for that either.
No.
That's going to be a very good team going forward. Granted, they just got popped for.
I think it's a nonsense thing, but I think that's a top 10 team going next year. Like I'll be riding them early because you have a perfect offensive system, an offensive genius with a free QB. And like we've saw enough pieces on defense, we're like, they'll figure it out.
Yeah.
I think they'll be really good next year. I think we were kind of that starting point.
Yeah.
Where you're like, oh, they kicked
Well, that also could have been a
us.
closer game if Deacon doesn't throw the pick.
Right.
There's some early plays. I haven't seen a QB draw go for a touchdown from 10 out in my lifetime, I think, under Iowa.
It was frustrating to see the D-line get moved for the first time.
I think it was, but again, you're kind of looking at a team that's achieved its goals.
Right.
It's a willpower team.
Yeah.
He might have been.
You got held a few times. Like you did have some big holding calls that were questionable.
Yeah. But I think, as successful as they were in the run game, we can't blame the hold for everything.
No, they had better athletes in space.
Yeah.
Their
O-line really showed up too.
I didn't know their O-line was going to be that good.
Yeah.
That was the most surprising thing was their O-line success. That was really good.
Yeah.
So I think I'll start with Twitter first. Iowa Director of Propaganda, OG ANF fan. I remember the first time we started this content, he was like a first tweet. He was like, hey, can't wait to listen to the ANF podcast. We're like, we have a fan.
Yeah.
So credit to you.
He is the fan.
The fan.
Yeah. We love you.
Yeah. Said, how will a somewhat healthy Cade fit into Lester's RPO scheme compared to past QBs? I think, like we mentioned, I think it's a hand in glove. I would not have any QB in the country run this type of RPO system. And actually, we haven't mentioned this yet. We should have when we were broken down Lester's film. He runs his backup QB.
Yeah.
Which is
I should have brought that up.
Yeah. Perfect situation for Marco and Cade.
Yeah.
So Cade, obviously coming off 2 knee injuries, super concerned about his health. You're not going to see him in any read option situation. So the RPO is not read option. RPO is just, in this situation, he's just going to be throwing the ball over middle out of a mesh set. He's never going to be keeping the ball. And Elabid was not much of a runner at Western Michigan. So he can run this offense exactly how it needs to be run by just being a point guard. But an interesting thing they did was about 5 times a game, they bring in the backup, who's essentially a running back. And we got one of those. We got Marco.
Yeah.
And he was an incredible athlete in the
this
bowl
is
game.
this is what we called for all season. It was like, just bring Marco in. And it was funny watching the tape back when you would see it. 1st and 10. It's essentially an opportunity where you have a free play where you can run a triple option QB and not have really a problem with it because you're just trying to get 4 yards.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where Marco can step in and be that guy.
Yeah.
Also, since he is still a QB, your RPO game, if they go nuclear on you and they line up in 0-look coverage or the safety's coming too fast, he can then throw the slant or he can throw the deep ball.
Yeah.
It's allowing Marco to be Marco at his best, where he can then you can have QB design plays and run him. It's not going to be 10 to 12 times a game like a starter would be, but 3 to 4 times where you want to just get a hit on someone else that's not your starters and get use out of it, and your short yardage gets solved, and goal line. It's the fact they never employed this.
Well, they did in 2020. Goodson ran it very well, and it was such a big hit that Brian's like, I have this great short yardage thing. We definitely stole from Minnesota from 2019 when they had Green running it, but 2021 we ran the Goodson Wildcat and it flopped.
Yeah,
it just didn't work.
You need a throw element out of it,
right? But you do need some throw element out of it, and I think everyone just like, oh, they have a Wildcat now. And they had 3 months to prepare for it. And they're like, this is how we'll handle the Wildcat.
Yeah.
And then I think Kirk's like, well, Wildcats suck.
Yeah.
And he's like, we're never doing that again. And I think he'll embrace it again if you have a throwing aspect to it. And Marco's a perfect guy to run it.
Yeah.
Next one's from Flint Ironstag. He's been commenting on our videos forever too. Follow her on Twitter. What is Leicester's preferred run blocking scheme based on from what you've seen?
It's all zone from what I've seen. Yeah. What's nice is that we didn't get to talk about this either, but because of the tight end insert they run and the tight end backside C block, that fits perfect with tight end delays. And if you're going to get the ball to a tight end, it's very easy to get him in delay fashion. What I mean by that is like when you run play action, they can come across the formation and leak out to the flats. Yeah. That's what you've seen from our boot action for the better part of 20 years now.
Yeah. And I'd say another big aspect of his reason why he can run zone in a shotgun sense is that when you're out of shotgun, your running back's next to you. Generally, you have an inside handoff where the zone is going opposite. And there's some teams that can hand the ball off straight
and go downhill
and create downhill looks and power concepts. Or
you'll see that
the guy flips at the last second and does it. So it is possible out of shotgun.
Yeah.
But he runs a pistol set as well. So that's just essentially, it behaves just like you're under center. It just allows you to have a quick passing game out of it as well. But then you can turn into a stretch game, both sides, because then the running back's behind you, and then it allows for runs to both sides. So I think zone is definitely his main concept.
Yeah, I think that's why Kirk likes it, because it does marry very well with pistol. Is like you mentioned, it's just under center.
Yeah,
but the QB's got his eyes up. It doesn't have to do with so much footwork.
Yeah,
and that's why it doesn't really make sense why it took so long to move away from it.
Yeah, it should have been implemented.
Because then, what we're talking about is when you're running the ball, you want to have every gap available to you before the snap. At least the defense has to account for every aspect of it. With pistol, you can now run outside zone to D gap to either side with 2 steps, and that's if you had to describe to Kirk why he maintained under center offense is because of that fact.
Yeah, because
you can hide the ball and every gap is available from the snap.
Definitely. And then Kirk Boy 7, also a long-time commentator, and gives a lot of predictions on the videos. What do you guys think is Iowa's best and worst case scenario for next year? I think he thinks 10-2 is a ceiling, 7-5 is a floor.
I would say I'm going to be pretty bullish about next year because of I think there's going to be more transfer portal players too. I think we're going to have a decent exodus after spring ball. That's going to probably lead to at least one more receiver. There's, Leicester's going to have some receiver selling to do. He's got some holes. He's had transfers out. Raga finally graduated. I love Cade. I think Cade can be an offense by himself. He can rally the troops. Just his confidence at the line, it's exuded. And I think with Proctor now being added, all that combined, I think we're actually going to see a pretty sustainable offense. I think high end 11-1. I don't see a perfect season coming out of nowhere. Defense certainly capable of it, but I don't think the offense is going to take that step. I don't think the low end's that low. I think 8-4 is about as low as you get. I think there's a lot of programs still trying to figure out what they're doing. Yeah. I think we're going to have a lot more to offer than transfer portal than, say a Minnesota.
Yeah.
And Nebraska's probably going to be able to get some guys, but Wisconsin's going to, they kind of fully reloaded.
Yeah.
Are they going to bring in, guys to replace Paulin and Bryson Green? No, it's like that's still going to be those guys against our guys.
So, I agree. I think 11-1 to 8-4.
Yeah.
That makes sense. I think 11-1 is, it's a more difficult schedule, but Washington became a lot easier game out of nowhere.
There's Ohio State on the road, but who's the third big one? Do we play Penn State or Michigan next year?
Neither.
Who's that third one I'm thinking of that's going to be the tough game?
Illinois State, Iowa State, Troy, Gophers, Ohio State, Washington, Michigan State, Northwestern, Wisconsin, UCLA, Maryland, Nebraska.
There isn't a third
one.
Yep.
So
I think 11-1 makes sense because I only have one out of loss.
I don't think Ohio State's going to show up with some unbeatable team too.
Going into the shoe though.
Yeah.
Our initial episode, we try to break down why are we so big in Iowa football? And I think that's such an interesting question because now you get into a full season of a podcast. You're like, these guys just are really into, scheme and understand the program. And I think the easiest way to break it down would be we were massive into football our entire lives.
Yeah.
From the age of 5 to 18, it was what we breathed and loved.
All I want to do is play for Iowa.
All we want to do ever was play for Iowa.
Yeah.
And then we have we are our senior year of high school, we have a great team. We are 11-1, go to the quarterfinals, and we lose in like a dramatic way. And truly, like as a football lifer, it's like hard to recover from something like that where you wanted
like PTSD about that.
You wanted to win a state title so badly. Yeah. And I think it actually led us to then almost pursue college football as an afterthought.
Yeah.
Because we were just going to go to the University of Iowa and like do that route. But then when we lost in the way we did in our senior year of football, we didn't win the state title. I think then we were like, let's just go like sniff around trying to get recruited somewhere.
Yeah.
And we got recruited by some D3 schools, and we were both recruited by St. Thomas to come up and play in Minneapolis. And when we found out that D3 football is not, what we made it out to be, then we turned into just studying the game.
Yeah.
And from 2013 Iowa football season till now, we've probably watched every game at least 3 times. And we just got obsessed with the idea of, understanding more about the game, and it became more and more knowledgeable. We reached out for it. So now this has been almost a decade of having a really big passion for football from the age of 5 to 18 to then becoming a student of the game, essentially from the age of like 19 to 29. And that's where we're at kind of right now.
Well, I think what we really enjoyed early on, just going back to our senior year, is because we played both sides of the ball. We'd sit down and watch film on Tuesday nights, and we kind of had to teach ourselves how to play D-end.
Yeah.
We had a guy come in. We were at a small school, Albert High School, and we had a guy come in and teach us, like, I think the week before our first game was like, hey, you guys going to run it this way. Yeah. And we started running it that way. We're a little more aggressive D-ends coming up field. And also we started getting beat in C-gap. Like, maybe we should start playing some more flat to the line. And this evolution of like learning how to play the scheme more effectively, we started learning how football kind of fits all together. And I think a lot of kids growing up, it's like, they think it's like size, strength, speed, and all that stuff. But where we really excelled in was predictive, playing.
Yeah.
We bat down a lot of passes when we saw, stuff coming our way. Never got beat outside of us.
We learned how to prepare. I was like, we were always really nervous for games. And the way we handled that was to watch film for 10 hours during the week. And I think now, like, who we actually are, like, we're attorneys.
Yeah.
Where we work in Minneapolis, and we have no connection to college football. We're not a consultant for some school.
No.
It's truly just, this is our hobby. And
it just went a little too far.
and we did put so much time into it. And now it's to the point where we wanted to share it with others, and we want to share it with, the fan base that loves Iowa. And if we can have you guys take away one thing every episode and learn one aspect of how Iowa plays or how football is handled that we've put so much time into, I think that's what our main takeaway of this show is.
Yeah, that's why we do it. And I think it's such a fun thing to, spread that knowledge. And then, the idea of building up a community who's all watching the same things.
Right.
And, maybe seeing that perpetuate with on like Twitter and other podcasts and other people who cover the team, building a collective idea of, how football is meant to be played. What are our problems with it? Not simplistic, Brian's an idiot, Kirk doesn't know what to do, he's an old turtle. Yeah. Like, having actual thoughts behind how we can improve this system.
Yeah.
That's the fun aspect of this for us.
It's just creating nuanced discussion about a team we really care about.
And a really funny commentary on this is, so Kyle tore his shoulder up, so he couldn't play his freshman year at St. Thomas. He was going to join our sophomore year. I came in, came into D3 football a little too cocky. I thought, I was like, I'm going in D3 so I can play as a freshman. Ended up losing like 45 pounds my freshman year. Would come home and see my brother playing Xbox for 4 hours a night with his buddies. I was like, why am I playing football? I'm bashing my heads in for D3. But the team I was on ended up actually being a very good team. And we played Tim Lester when he was the head coach of Elmhurst. And their team should have beat us. And we ended up going to the national title that year.
Yeah. Really good team.
Had 3 guys who made NFL camps on that team. The defense was the number 1 in the country. His Elmhurst team, who actually had the D3 Heisman at running back, came in and moved the ball consistently on us. And that's such a moment where it's like, I know he's good because he came in and beat, that defense, which had, you go through the names on that defense. Kyle, them up. There's a lot of freak athletes who should have probably been at D1 teams, but ended up at St. Thomas because of ACL tears and various injuries.
Yep.
But it's just a funny anecdote because you looked it up, you're like, Elmhurst.
Yeah. And I was like, wait, when did they? Yeah. And I looked up the school. I'm like, I remember they played like blue team.
Yeah.
blue and white team their second round of the playoffs, like our freshman year, and they were almost came in. I think they went 14 rip, and then St. Thomas got like a 85-yard fumble recovery to kind of went 20-14 and should have beat them. And then I was like, oh, Lester was a coach that year, and he won the conference coach of the year, I think, for the conference they won.
And then that the year after that is when he jumped to Syracuse.
Yeah,
which is crazy.
Moving on to the next question. Essentially, this is from Nathan. What is the evolution of the Big Ten Conference? Essentially, what is with Oregon joining? Where does Iowa fit in? Says they're looking forward to predictions next year's, and I think it definitely plays in the part. But just going through our schedule, I think we kind of got a break in a sense. You don't play Oregon next year. You don't play USC.
I think being the team that we are, we're very well positioned to play Pac-12 teams because of what we saw in the national title game.
Yeah.
Pac-12 teams are just inherently soft. They're not built around defense. They're built around explosive plays, not really even built around running the ball for the most part as well.
I would only push back on Oregon. I think Oregon's built around.
I still don't see them as some physical force that's going to be willing to die for country. Just kind of the evolution of the West Coast too. And I think that was our fear, was that you're going to Washington was kind of entering this like superpower phase. They had a lot of successful years in a row. Oregon's obviously NIL capital of the world. They're going to be able to pull in guys. We might get lost in the muck as like the clear 7th or 8th best team in the Big Ten. I don't think that's very clear anymore. I think now Oregon's the only one I can see as like a clear head above Iowa going into next year. USC and Washington are likely going to be able to keep on bringing in high-level QB recruits, which is how they're going to differentiate themselves. But if they don't have that guy, say they're developing a freshman or sophomore, they don't pick up Washington didn't pick up the big QB recruit in the market. They got that Nolan guy out of Mississippi State. Actually, I end up leaving now, so now they don't even have a QB right now. We played a USC team in 2019 that had Amon St. Brown, Michael Pittman,
Drake London.
There's a fourth guy in there, I think, even too, and beat the crap out of him. Granted, we had Slovis get hurt in that game, but still, it wasn't like it was some dominating force. It wasn't like the USC teams of old. So it's a changing landscape. Hell of a lot rather be in the Big Ten than what I just saw from Iowa State's schedule. You go into how you're playing Houston and all those teams. I think we're going to see Iowa's boat rise with the tides. This is going to be one of two premier conferences now. QBs are going to want to play for these teams. They're going to be the big market games. It's going to be your way into the playoff, even if you're not a super successful team, is being in these two big conferences. So I think we're actually going to see Iowa rise as these two conferences consolidate. And I think it's going to end up being for the better.
All right. I think it's a great question to end it on. So we appreciate all the support this year. Obviously, we mentioned about 10 years of knowledge now of following these teams closely. How would you rank this? He's going to do the previous 9 Iowa teams.
Okay.
Let's go back to, I want to even do it harder. 2013. Let's since this was a 10-2 team, technically, a 10-4 team, who actually had better teams
than this team?
That's what I'm going to change this question.
Just make it easier on us.
Make it easier on ourselves. But let's think about the teams that we felt like were more talented and didn't, accomplish what this team accomplished. Because this won a West title, won 10 games. It could have won 11. It should have won 11.
If it stayed healthy, I think it's the best team.
This team?
If it stayed healthy.
I would argue.
I think Cooper is such a talent.
We got to go with 2015, obviously, right?
Oh, no.
Better than, you don't think 2015 was better than this team?
I think it's definitely an argument. I think the defense is such a step up.
I'm going to list off a few players, just Josie Jewell, Desmond King, George Kittle.
Yeah. Yeah, but I mean, Eric All, you might be seeing be a top
Austin
player.
Blythe.
Okay. But the weaknesses on that team, I guess, but receiver, you had Tavon, Vandenberg.
It wasn't really a weakness.
No, there wasn't a lot of weaknesses. Cole Fisher's your weak side.
Ben Neiman.
Ben Neiman's your strong side.
So, no, Nick Neiman. Ben Neiman.
Ben Neiman. Who's your D-line, though, on that team?
Jaleel Johnson, Drew Rod, Nate Meyer.
Redshirt freshman Parker Hesse.
Yeah, but you also have Nate Meyer as a redshirt senior. Jaleel Johnson, Faith Ekikite is your backup D tackle.
Nathan Budgeta.
I don't know, man.
Jordan Lomax and Miles Taylor.
Yep.
That's where you start to lose me a little bit.
I like Lomax was really
Lomax really good, but Taylor was not good.
Yeah. Taylor was good that.
Taylor's a good player,
And
but
he got banged up.
yeah, probably just got hurt.
I just think like the star power on the team. Like I know the star power on this team.
CJ Beathard, yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean,
Kinzier was a couple back. I don't know.
Career Global.
I think,
okay. Well, I'll give you that. 2015 is better.
Yeah.
2018, I have to say is better because the NFL talent on the team it's honestly gaudy when you go through it. You go Wirfs, Alark, Font, Hawkinson, ISM. D-line gets even scarier. Chauncey, AJ, Anthony Nelson.
Backups. Yep. 3D ends.
3D ends are in the NFL.
Both tackles.
Linebackers, Christian Welch, actually still playing in the NFL.
Yeah.
Corner's a little shaky. That's where it fell apart.
Yep. Young, but
because you lost Josh Jackson a little early.
Two NFL guys, though, in the end.
Two true freshmen.
Yeah. Brand Snyder. No. Amani Hooker and Geno Stone and Jake Gervais.
It's just corner that
2018, we said in the first few episodes, 2018 was the most underachieving team in maybe Ferentz's
history.
It's
honestly not close.
Yeah. And then I'd say I'd go 2015, number one, obviously, just for pedigree of like a few of those players. 2018, and then I'd say 2020 was better in this team because you look back to Charlie Jones, now in the NFL, ISM, Laporta, Brandon Smith, Goodson,
Sean Byer.
Don't even count Sean Byer. Goodson, all those guys are making money in the NFL. Alark, Linderbaum, that's your offense.
Alark was so dominant that year.
So good. And then
Banwer's your starting left.
Kallenberger would have made the NFL, I think, if you
Kallenberger if he didn't quit.
Then you think defense, it's like Davion Nixon, Chauncey Golston,
Van Valkenburg,
Jack Campbell at the peak of his power. When he turned the page finally that year.
Yeah.
Riley Moss.
Who's your cash? Dane Belton?
No. Yeah. 2020 is
those three teams are better.
Yeah.
But I would say it's close with 2020 in this season if the injuries don't occur because you don't know how Cade ends up playing as the year goes on. The O-line might not look that bad if you have a passing attack. Yeah. It performed well enough in the first 3 games or 4 games where I was still this has some potential to it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I still go back to 2018. You think about the Sean Byer kicked punt.
Yeah. I want to go back.
Nate Stanley.
I think it's time to wrap it up. We've been going pretty far.
Yeah.
But I think what we want to end it on is just, this is our last episode.
Let's cover the Big Ten next year. So we're still going to do an Iowa focus part of our podcast. It won't be, 45-minute previews anymore. It'll likely be condensed down to, probably closer to 10 to 15 minutes, maybe 20 minutes on some longer episodes, some better games. Still, the passion's going to be there. The film breakdown's going to I'm going to rewatch the games regardless of whether I'm talking about it or not. But to broaden this up to a wider audience, we're actually going to cover the whole Big Ten. Mm-hmm. That's where the work is really going to be done. Where we're going to actually have more episodes produced is in the off season because we're just going to have a lot more content to ingest.
Yep.
Recruiting, scheme, matchups, and all that stuff. But really excited to see if we can expand this show to something bigger.
Yep.
We're not planning on making this our full-time job. As we mentioned, we're both full-time attorneys working for financial companies in Minneapolis. So it's still going to remain a hobby for a time. But if this thing takes off in the long term, we certainly want to open the doors to more content with the Big Ten.
Yeah, and I think if you guys have made this far in the episode, you guys watch a bunch of our stuff, leave comments on things we can improve for next year.
Yeah.
We want to get better at this. We want to make better content for you. Drop a comment. Say, change this, add this. We're always looking to improve. And once again, thanks again for all the support. This has been such a blast for us to do. Not doing this the last few weeks, we really missed it. You've really missed this community that we've built. And truly having this a part of our every week during the football season was amazing. So Hawk fans are the best, and we really appreciate you guys.
Yeah, I'd like to reiterate all of that. Simple interactions on it within a YouTube comment. It's surprising how much that makes your day. Anytime you guys interact with us, we love it. It's like you have, other friends that are passionate Hawk fans, and obviously with you guys continue to support us, then we know we're doing the right things. And
right.
As you mentioned, anything we can improve. But we're really blown away by how much support we've gotten early. Obviously, this thing can get a lot better. The more money we pour into it, the more fanfare we get. if you guys can, pump this out to as many friends as you can, not just via social media, but via text, be like, hey, recommendations for this, that would help us out a ton. But yeah, just really enjoyed it. I will miss it this offseason. We'll probably be back sooner than we thought just because we'll miss it. But thanks again.
Also, since we're taking a quick break here, most likely to May, if you want to stay up to date what we're doing, we have a Twitter profile that we'll post on more consistently during this hiatus at the ANF Podcast. We're still watching basketball, unfortunately, begrudgingly this season. But we'll have any updates about recruiting, anything we're finding, watching film from even this year to prep for next year. Any quick tidbits will be tweeting out more and trying to be more active since we're not posting online anymore on YouTube. So catch us there. Go Hawks.
All right, go Hawks.